podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Nicole.
And hello, listeners.
Hi, guys.
So it's just Rachel and I here today. Erin is off gallivanting in Ireland. Well,
That's right.
Maybe gallivanting is not the right word, but
I
if
like
you're
that
following,
word, though.
it
It's good for
sounds a bit
Ireland.
Irish.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's good for
true.
Ireland.
It's true. If you're following, so if you follow us on Instagram, if you probably are seeing some actually really beautiful pictures that Erin's been posting of different like castles and things in Ireland. So if you're not following us on Instagram, so Erin runs our Insta channel,
Yeah, it's Erin.
and it's completely her because Rachel and I are both in grad school and busy, and we'll talk about that today.
Yeah.
And
like
also
we're
I'm
kind of
terrible at social media.
Yeah,
I'm just like
exactly. We're
I am.
just
It's
not,
like a
no.
drain, and everything I post, not everything, but often it's just sort of strange or awkward. I can do LinkedIn, which says maybe something about me. That's all I can do.
That's hilarious.
But anyways, so Erin is the one who runs it. So you never know what to expect on our Instagram.
That's
It can
right.
be truly anything can come up, and maybe it's related to suffering, and maybe it is.
Like
My
a
sister
fart
was telling me
joke.
that there was like a fart joke or something talking about like boob lamps or something like that.
I'm
So
not
or
surprised.
pictures of castles in Ireland. So it's Erin.
It's a
Erin,
wild
so
ride.
It's a wild
if
ride.
you're looking for like entertainment that is very surprising and also delightful.
Yeah.
And also maybe shocking at times, but
Yeah,
in a good
and
way.
also maybe deep and meaningful.
That's
sometimes,
right.
But
Very
that's
true.
Very in contrast, maybe it balances out our podcast on suffering is the way that our Instagram
goes. Yeah.
So anyway, so you can take a look. But it's just Rachel and I today.
Yeah. It kind of feels like, when you're in a family and like people leave and it's like normally like you have a house of 5 people and then there's only like 2 of you there and you're like, this is weird. Like,
yeah,
like it's
exactly.
not bad, but it kind of, you're like, whoa, you're different.
Like, oh, this is it's a different dynamic. Like, let's figure this out, That's great.
Let's put on a movie and make some popcorn.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Not,
sleepover something.
Sleepover time. Anyways,
yeah.
We miss you.
So Rachel, yes, we do miss Erin. So she'll be back hopefully for the next episode, I think, maybe.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
Potentially. Which we should also tell people about that at the end because I think it's really exciting.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. We'll tell you about that.
Teaser about our next episode.
Teaser. Okay, so Rachel was just telling me what she did last night, and it sounds really fun. So you should tell our listeners.
Okay, so I had a hard kind of month of like a lot of particular kind of work leading up to this big exam test thing that I had to do, and I don't even know how the test went really. I mean, I think it went okay, but regardless, it was kind of just like an accomplishment to be done it and like get over that hurdle. And so a couple of my friends organized this little group of us, and we went to a club in DC, and we went to a Taylor rave. Now, what is a Taylor rave, you might be asking? I will say it did not involve LSD or any other kinds of illegal drugs, which was good because that's not really my style. But it was at a club. It was basically a DJ who kind of remixed Taylor Swift songs. And I wouldn't call myself like a Swiftie. Like, I'm not really, I do have respect for Taylor. I was saying this, like, I think she's a great songwriter. It's kind of amazing to me how many hits that girl can churn out. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't know her music like super, super well. I do like it when I hear it. But it was fun because the DJ basically like remixed it, and it was like all these like downbeats and a lot of like, and there was like lasers, and we danced, and I was like out of my house till past midnight, which is not my life. It hasn't been my life in a long time. And I was kind of like, when was the last time I danced at a bar or a club or something? It was probably when I was in my early 20s. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. And it was the moment for that. It just was, it needed to happen. And it was so much fun. And I will say this, we can talk about this a bit too. This is not related to our topic for the day, but it was like mostly girls, which when you're a girl and you go to a club, you're like, this is great.
So much better. Sorry.
It's like better.
You don't have to like, yeah.
Then I was thinking about this and I was like, we talk about how we like really want men to approach us and stuff like that. I was like, it's hard. Like, what if a nice guy is at a bar and he sees a girl who's beautiful, and it kind of like, and it's like, and he says something like he should be able to do that. I don't know. Anyways, a lot of thoughts came into my head.
Sure.
About that.
I'm sure. I think there's a way to approach a woman in a bar that is really respectful, and then there's many ways that are not that. So,
But we're so conditioned as women to be like, this is a bar. Like, any
yeah, and to be
man.
kind of on guard or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you come even like near me, I'm like alert, and so it's just sort
Sure.
of, it's kind of an interesting, I was
And
just thinking
I'm
about
saying
that.
this like, I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, sure. And I'm like, I never go to bars, like ever. So, anyways.
Well, not bars, I guess clubs. Like you go,
Sure.
you go to a pub or a bar that way.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like,
yeah. I mean, yeah.
right. Like a club, like a dancing club. Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed myself the dancing clubs when I was.
That is so good.
Which makes me sound so old that I said dancing clubs.
Dancing
in a
clubs?
row. Yeah.
At
What
the
is
disco?
that? At the disco when I was in my early 20s. I went to the disco.
At the sock hop? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yesterday there was like a couple of us who were like kind of like quite a bit younger than me, and just like wonderful girls. And whatever, it was a mix of us. I was telling one of my younger friends, I was like, dude, I suddenly realized how old I was because I had to resist way too many times the urge to clap like to the music.
Do people not clap anymore?
I know you don't clap. That's like real. That's like your
old people
uncle at the
stuff.
wedding. Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Actually, I'm thinking about my uncles. My dad are at the wedding too. At weddings. Yeah,
So
I still clap sometimes. I don't know.
I did. I clapped a few times, but I had to
Then
resist.
you realize that it wasn't cool anymore.
No.
And probably the word cool isn't even cool.
No. Yeah. I don't know what, in terms of lingo, we're gone.
Who knows?
We're not even, we're kind of, I've seen some TikTok videos about young people and like new lingo, and like literally people in their 20s don't understand what teenagers are saying. So I'm like, okay.
There's changes very quickly.
Yeah. Many layers between us and the kids, The
kids. Yes.
What's going on with the youths today.
Yes.
Anyways, that's what I did.
I'm glad you got to dance this weekend. Or yesterday. We well, we went somewhere. Where the heck? We did two things. This is every time I like have to remember like what I did yesterday, I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? Or like on the week, people be like, how was your weekend on Monday? And I'm like, I think it was good. I have like good feelings associated with it. I don't really remember any of it, but because it's usually just like laundry and catching up with people or something. But well, I will say, okay, last weekend, on Saturday night, Nathan and I have been trying to get back into doing like a weekly date night because we kind of got off schedule during the holidays and just traveling and everything. So last weekend, Saturday night, we went to, this was like perfect for us because it was a brewery that was having a swing dancing night, which is like, I love swing dancing.
Yeah, Nicole is actually great at, you are so good at swing dancing.
Well, I used to be. I'm like rusty now. I fell swing dancing like on my knee. I don't even know how it happened. So I definitely need to like get into practice more, but that was very fun. And it was not, it wasn't, I won't say it wasn't a rave. You wouldn't say that quite. It wasn't
a rave.
But it was some good dancing, and sometimes it's even fun to just like watch the really good dancers as well.
Yeah.
And just really cool. So it was good.
That
dancing.
is fun. Lots of dancing.
Is great.
People go dance. Honestly, I know it's
my gosh.
I sound like such a girl. I'm like, just go dance. But it's true. Dancing is awesome.
It's probably one of the best things for you as a human, which is not why you should do it. It's also just like the most fun things as a human.
Fun.
It's good. People are always like saying that they want to grow in vulnerability. And I think dancing is one of the top ways to do that.
That's true. Yeah. You really have to be comfy with yourself out there.
There you go.
Not care about anybody else. Yeah.
I mean,
we put on a lot of glitter yesterday. I think glitter helps if you're a girl.
Nice.
If you're a guy, maybe don't do the glitter.
Yeah.
You could.
Maybe. I
don't know. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
We're getting into different topic conversation.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So here's my like segue into our topic today, Rachel, is that I think when I was doing my master's, I got into dancing when I was doing my master's because I felt like that is what got me through my master's, was just like going out swing dancing, like sometimes 2 or 3 times a week I'd be out swing or salsa dancing. And it was just like, I think I like ruined my feet forever that year.
Oh no.
Like I can, I have like a bunion on my right toe now from like, I think swing dancing from like, cause you're kind of hopping on that foot all the time.
Right.
But it was completely worth it. It was very good and needed. We're talking about, it was funny. We were talking about like topics and that we wanted to talk about in the podcast. And I think in that conversation, we'd all like, both you and I, Rachel, had both been like, oh yeah, like this thing with grad school right now, this thing with grad school. And then we're like, maybe we should talk about this. This is a good topic, right?
Talk about grad school and the suffering associated. I do want to say that, so I was thinking about this today and I was like, this isn't just going to be a conversation of me and Nicole just like cribbing about complaining about grad school, because I mean, and I think that's important for this podcast. Just if you're a new listener, like, yeah, this is not a podcast about, we don't want to just, it's not about just like airing our complaints,
No.
but there's like good in hard things. I mean, I think there's like, there's value in hard things, and there's ways to live through hard things. And the truth is, there are aspects of grad school that are wonderful, and there are aspects of grad school that are hard in a very unique kind of way. And I think that's what we really want,
it's
because
just,
we were realizing,
it's important to articulate those experiences just for the sake of, I think that complaining or feeling burdened by things can happen more if we haven't articulated, like, oh yeah, this is the thing that's difficult, right?
Yeah.
And once we are able to talk about it and articulate it, we can move through it in a different way.
Yeah.
But no, and I mean, I was saying this to Rachel before we hit record, but like okay, so I'm almost finished my PhD. I knew since I was like in undergrad that I wanted to do grad school. I wanted to do a PhD. Even without fully knowing what it was, but I knew that it meant like you get to do more school and learn something really deeply, and I liked that. But when I just think about, you hear these stories about people like the first woman to complete a PhD in X amount field, and or the first, and like it wasn't that long ago where it just wasn't all that common for women to go to grad school or to do PhDs. And I would say like probably once a month it'll pop into my mind to be like, oh my gosh, like, Lord, I am so thank you that I was born now, that I get to do this, because it is what I'm called to do. It is so life-giving to me to be in academia. And it's an incredible, as much as there are difficulties with it, like there's so much life in it for me. And so I'm so just grateful that I'm able to do this. So that's, I mean, that's I think the context, part of the context of this conversation is this like deep gratitude for this, for being able to be in school.
And I think so one of the things we both realized when we were talking about this is like grad school I think is a calling for anybody, like for any student. And it's particularly poignant, Nicole, like you're saying, like, okay, maybe like women weren't allowed to be in grad school not that long ago. I mean, that's just like the word. This is not like a comment on history and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, that was
like the reality
truth,
of
right? That was just the
time.
reality. And, but Nicole, you're called to it. I feel very called to it. I feel called to it. And I will say it's so funny for me. So we'll talk about that for a minute. Like, I think it's important because I feel it's very life-giving to me. But I feel called to it in the way where I'm like, okay, the Lord, like my background is I did law. I was practicing law for a little while, not very, very long. And I had a circumstance in my life that I needed to take a pause in work. And I did that. And then when I was sort of worked through that circumstance, I realized like, okay, I don't actually, and I didn't ever feel called to be a lawyer long-term. I just kind of felt called to do it for a little while. It's confusing. This is the Lord in my life. But anyways, I was like, okay, I had this in prayer and through my spiritual director and people, I had this sense of like, I don't think that I should go back to the law right now. I think that God is saying like, quit now, which was always I always thought, okay, I'm going to work for 5 years, become, really competent in a particular field in law, then I think God is going to call me somewhere else. But it happened in like, 3 years, basically after I finished law school. And so I was like, okay, this is like way sooner, but I felt at peace. And I really took time. I took about 6 months from when I quit and had been through this ordeal that I was going through, and to discern where God was calling me next. So it was like a really serious discernment. And it was grad school in theology. And the thing is, for me, it had to be a calling because, you don't come to grad school in theology to sort of like bankroll. Like that's not, like it's not a career move. Like, you know what I mean?
Doing a PhD, I don't know, people are like, oh, a PhD. And you're like, well, we're not doing it because of the money, maybe in some fields, maybe, but like, this is not, you have to delay working for like 4 to 6 years probably. And those jobs, like being a professor is not necessarily going to make you the big bucks, like really, truly. So it's not,
if you even get it, like depending on what field.
Right. Exactly.
Get to be a professor. So it's like, it really, I mean, and I had great professors in my master's who made this very clear to me. Like when they recommended me, when they did my, letters of recommendation and stuff like that, they were fantastic. And they were like, listen, we like, obviously, like, we believe in you. Like we see this step you're taking as like a logical step in terms of your work and whatever. But, why are you going to grad school? If you're going as
Mm-hmm.
a career move, they were like, don't do it. Just don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew that, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a serious reality that I think people have
Yeah.
to contend with, whatever your field is, especially in
Mm-hmm.
theology. But if it is a calling, and which in my case it was, at least
Mm-hmm.
for up until now, I definitely was meant to be here till now, then
Mm-hmm.
then it's the Lord that you're trying to glorify with your life, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's beautiful and good. And all the
Mm-hmm.
sufferings that come along with it are, because here's the thing, there are sufferings that come along with it, and
Yeah.
they are bearable because you have the grace to bear
Because
them,
you've discerned it. Yeah. Which I
you
think,
know?
I mean, that could be, an early takeaway point for anything. It's like if you are living a life where you're discerning God's call, and I don't mean like discernment of then like overthinking everything all the
Mm.
time, like that's bad.
Yeah.
Don't do that. I mean,
No,
I'd say
no.
that as somebody who overthinks everything all the time, but like but yeah, just a sense of desire and this recognition of, oh my gosh, this is a thing that gives me life and I'm going to keep pursuing that, right? Which is like kind of, I think, a way of talking about the
Yeah,
heart of Ignatian discernment, right? Of
totally.
like, what is it that brings you alive and go
Totally.
do that thing. And I mean, I think that's, the same thing in marriage. You love somebody and you marry them and it's really beautiful and it's a calling, and there's going to be challenges, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
this is not
It's a universal thing
it's a
about,
universal thing about
yeah,
life.
that's right. About
In different
discerning your
ways, right?
call in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Big B
Calling.
vocations, little V
Yeah.
vocation kind of thing of your work and stuff. So I think that's true. Yeah. And um I think one thing that's been interesting for me is how so maybe, yeah, one of the I guess challenges,
Yeah.
but is how, like, I think this calling to grad school has interacted with other callings in my life and like
Hmm.
vocation.
Yeah.
Um, because I can think about in when I was in undergrad, just being very, very school focused and very probably overly stressed and trying to figure out life and stuff. But sort of vocation or dating, it was always something where I'm like, oh, like I really want to meet someone, but I literally just like didn't go out and study all the time. I'm just like very
Right.
introverted, studious person. And um but I remember at one point, I think it was like later in undergrad or something. I don't honestly, I don't remember when exactly this was, but at some point in my 20s, I remember praying about vocation, but I had a tremendous amount of anxiety when I thought about vocation because I didn't have a strong sense of if I was called to be married or called
Yeah.
to religious life or whatever it was. And there was things in both of those that like kind of were drawing, like I was drawn to that. Um, and I remember praying about it, and every time I think about vacation, I would just be like totally anxious. And so praying about it, and it was like a really clear word from the Lord, where He was just like, "You don't need to worry about your vocation right now. I just want you to focus on school and
Mm.
career. Like that's where I'm calling you, and it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay if you don't think about your vocation
Yeah.
right now, even though you're in your, in
Yeah.
this thing
Yeah.
where I was
Yeah.
like, I was in my mid 20s, and there's a lot of kind of societal pressure at that point, or even like church pressure to be like, yeah, discern your vocation, like you should do this. And I was like, the Lord being like, no, it's okay. It's okay that this is
Yeah.
where you're at.
Right.
And that was, really helpful for me because it wasn't until like my late 20s that I really was able to come to a point of recognizing like, okay, I actually desire marriage. And then starting to date and all of these things.
Yeah.
And so it was this thing where I always felt like I was doing really well and thriving in my like academically or in my career, but sort of my vocation, baby vocation life was always a challenge for me. Dating
Yeah.
was always a
Yeah.
challenge until I got married, and now there's been just so much more peace, but just that unknown
Yeah.
was so hard. And I think that was, yeah, just like, I don't know, just a challenge, right? To think
Yeah.
about, okay, I feel really called to this, but it feels like it's going against some of the things that I'm told I'm supposed to do as like a good Catholic girl,
Right. This
just
is so
figure out my
interesting
vocation. Yeah.
because there's a big conversation, I think, about that happening in the world right now. And we're not like, and I don't mean to be like, oh, this is what that's not the point of, I think, this podcast,
Yeah.
but it is connected because,
Yeah.
you know, there are, you know, there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs. And
Yeah.
the thing
There
is, like,
actually are.
there are real trade-offs. Like, I think I think if as a woman, there's this whole thing right now, I think on TikTok or YouTube, there's like this whole thing about
Mm.
like millennial women in
Hmm.
their 30s, like career women who
Mm-hmm.
feel lied to by the culture because everything was
Mm.
like, be a boss babe, be a thing, and then like they're
Mm-hmm.
alone in their 30s, and
Yeah.
are like, I don't know, and they suddenly realize like, I actually don't want to live for myself. I want to live, I want to have a family,
Mm-hmm.
I want to have children,
Mm-hmm.
like, and they're lost. And it's like this whole like
Yeah.
trend that's literally
Interesting.
happening right now.
Wow.
And so the thing I think is like, the good thing maybe about the pressure that you were feeling is that you were aware of your whole, like your whole self, like all of these
Mm-hmm.
aspects. And the Lord was like,
Right.
no, it's okay, but you can leave this one aspect with me right now and pursue
Yeah.
this. But it wasn't like you were ignoring, like it wasn't like you were like, well, this
No.
doesn't matter, and I'm just
Right.
doing this thing.
Right.
And I think that it, like in grad school, so if you are called to it as a woman, like you do have to be like, okay, Lord, like there's these other things, these other desires of my
Yeah.
heart. What
Mm-hmm.
do I do about that? Like you have to ask those questions. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the challenge of being in
Mm-hmm.
this work, is as a
Mm-hmm.
woman, is like you do have to ask yourself those questions, because it is reality that
Mm-hmm.
we, like, if we want children, all these things, like it's not, we can't just, there
You
are
can't delay that
trade-offs.
till you're 55, you
You
know?
cannot. You
Yeah.
cannot.
Yeah.
There are real trade-offs. And so it's like, okay, I think if you're called to something, it's
Mm-hmm.
not really a trade-off, because what you're saying is you're just saying yes to what the Lord is asking of you,
Mm-hmm.
but you're realizing
Yeah.
what he's not asking of you, which
Mm-hmm.
maybe he's asking of a lot of people. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's been my life, like I'm in my mid
Yeah.
30s and I feel like I never, ever, I was never, I'm not even, to be honest with you guys, like I'm not even an ambitious person. Like I'm a passionate person and I'm a competitive person in a certain sense. Like I like to do my best. I like to do well,
Mm-hmm.
which God has
Mm-hmm.
also purified big time in me, because that can be not good also. But I'm not necessarily an ambitious person. I was never
Mm.
like, I want to like rule the
You're not
world. I
like
was like,
thinking 10 steps ahead or something.
no, like
You're like
never.
passionate about whatever is put in front of you and you're like, yes,
Yes.
this, I'm in
I
it,
want to
you
be
know?
awesome at this.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and even like in terms of like being, I was like, I was never like, I want to be in charge of stuff. I was like, that sounds like a lot of work. Like, I was like,
Uh-huh.
I don't want
Uh-huh.
to be, so that's
Right.
the kind of way I was. So I was never like that.
Right.
But the Lord, like, he literally, he called me into law school. He called me into
Mm-hmm.
grad school. He did not call me into, and it's, he did not call me into marriage. And it was not for a lack of desire or being open or,
Right.
and there were things that I had to work through for sure. And I mean, I'm still open to marriage, but I think that for me, I have a lot of peace. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
a struggle to not be in my big V vocation, but I have a
Right.
lot of peace in grad school as a woman. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like that is in, uh,
Incompatible
yeah, incompatible, or
or
just like in conflict
gotcha.
with my
Yeah.
vocation, because it's what God is
Yeah.
calling me to. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
tomorrow I got married and the Lord was like, don't go work for some
Right.
reason, I think I would be fine with that too. Because in a certain sense, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's what the Lord is calling me to. Not that I think that he would and if he said keep working and have a
Mm-hmm.
baby, he would show me how to do that too. So I
Yeah.
just
Right.
feel like the
Yeah.
challenge of being in grad school is, one of the things is it does delay these things. You have to be honest with yourself about that.
Yeah.
You have to pray about those things. You have to give it to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have to trust,
Mm-hmm.
that even though your life looks different, if you are called to this,
Mm-hmm.
God is in charge of
Yeah.
all those
Of all
aspects
of
of your
that.
life,
Yeah. Well, and I look at, I there's really beautiful examples. I look at, so I have a cousin who did her PhD and she's just doing really, really wonderful work up in Ontario.
Mhm.
Um, and she was in her PhD and then she met somebody one summer at work and then they got married and then mid PhD they had a baby. And so she was, and this is now in Canada, so she was able to take like a year maternity leave during her PhD and then they had another baby and she hadn't like planned all of this out,
Yeah.
but it all happened and then she finished. It took her PhD, it took longer than she expected, but she did
Yeah.
finish it and she has a great job now and she's a great mom and all of these things. But I remember talking to her and she was just kind of like, yeah, like I don't know, like there it is, like this is just
That's
how
what
it happened.
happened.
But
Yeah.
I see like the Lord's hand in that, where or I have other colleagues who've had kids mid PhD and it's been hard, but it's been really good. And
Yeah.
and I'm almost done my PhD, and the Lord hasn't given me a baby. God hasn't called us
Yeah.
to have a baby yet. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's also like, okay, this is where
Yeah.
we're called, and so I do think that it invite being in grad school, really having some sort of career that you feel called to, and then balancing that with some, thinking about vocation. It just invites a deeper like I don't know, leaning into the Lord and his call. And I'm not,
Yeah.
and I'm okay. So I say this, and I also, there are everything in life, many
Yeah,
circumstances in life
totally.
call us to deeper walks with the Lord, right? But we're just talking about this particular one, and how does this in grad school in particular call us into this deeper walk? And I think it is partly through that, because we have to just now discern all these different things, and in a sense, sort of surrender, say, okay, Lord, like show me the next step, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, for me,
yeah,
another thing like that is money, right? Like is literally money because
mm-hmm.
you don't make a lot of money if you're in grad school. That's just the reality
Yeah,
of it. And so if you're, if you had these dreams and thoughts as a younger person of like, well, for me in my case, like by the time I get to my mid 30s, I want to be like this and I want to have these things and I want to be
yeah,
like if God is calling you to something like this, sometimes you have to let that go. And not that you have like you have
yeah,
to be you have to be prudent with what God
yeah,
gives you and try to,
right,
you know, like the talents parable.
yeah,
Like you got
mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
like it's not an excuse just because you're in grad school. I don't think, and I think people take it this way sometimes. So I think sometimes when you're in grad school, people are like, well, I don't even have any money. Who cares? And people just are irresponsible financially. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if you have some money or if you have some resources, whatever, I think the Lord is calling you to do as much with
Yeah,
that,
be a good steward with that. Yeah.
be a good steward of it. and
Mm-hmm.
and you still have something, so you got to be a good steward of that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're not thinking about new cars or buying a house or anything like this.
Right.
And
Definitely not. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's like, okay, then you have to also be detached. There's a sense of
Mm-hmm.
security that you have to put in the Lord, not
Mm-hmm.
in yourself, where you're like, okay, Lord,
Mm-hmm.
I again, it goes back to calling, like, you call me to this,
Mm-hmm.
trust you that you will provide. The providence of God
Mm-hmm.
is a very real dimension, I think, of being in grad school, of literally like
Yeah.
falling on the providence of God, leaning
Yeah.
fully into that
Totally.
and trusting him. And in my experience,
Yeah.
honestly, he really has provided. And where he has
Yeah.
not provided, it's just been kind of it's not been a test, but it's sort of been like, will you just trust?
Like an
Dude,
invitation to trust. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, just trust me for a sec here, and
Yeah.
it's good because you learn, okay, my security is really not in money, it's
Yeah.
not in things, it's
Yeah.
not even in my home, it's in the
Mm-hmm.
Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I will trust,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely. Um, it's funny because we're supposed to be talking about the suffering of grad school, but we're just end up talking about like
yeah.
all these ways that God has like grown us in grad school, which is good too, but through these difficulties. But no, I think of that too with like housing.
Yeah.
When I moved from Winnipeg to Toronto for my master's, this was a big question, was like, where am I gonna live? Like
Yeah.
in Toronto, which is a hugely expensive city, and and I'm not going to be making like a lot of money. Like I had a funded grad school, but
Yeah.
it was funded like well below the poverty line,
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so, and I wasn't allowed to work at the same time too. I had to like sign something that said I'm not going to work more than 10
Yeah.
hours a week.
Right.
So it was just like, okay, I'm not like whatever I need, it has to be
How do I
real
live?
cheap,
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
quarter of what the average rent price is in Toronto. That's my maximum budget, right? And
Yeah.
so it was just like, and I remember like looking for places. But like twice the two different, I think I lived, yeah, two different places in Toronto, kind of three, but I lived, um, anyways, all of these things like they just came, like the Lord just provided these opportunities for housing that actually fit in my budget. And
Yeah.
I somehow was even able to save money during grad
That's
school, which I don't
amazing.
even know how
That's
that
that math does
happened.
not work out. That
It
math
does
does
not.
not work
It
out.
was very, by the end of when I moved to the US, I had this like money saved up that I was able to actually like pay for that move. And I was just like, how did that happen? Like,
Crazy.
just like the Lord was just providing. And again, like there's responsibility, and I'm probably a very frugal person by nature,
Yeah,
which is
same.
helpful. Um, but yeah, just like, and that's even been a comfort now, like when Nathan and I, living in Nashville, and we're renting, but we're like, we'd love to buy a house, but I don't know how that's going to happen. And I'm in
Yeah,
my mind, I'm like, well, the Lord has provided for me like every single time for housing. So like,
I'm
that's my
fine.
prayer now, is like, Lord, like, what kind of house are you going to figure
Yeah,
out
I
for
love
us? Like,
that.
what are
I
you going to
love
do? Cause
that. I
like,
love
this
that.
is your thing, right? This is your job, Lord.
I love that.
But I feel like, yeah, just like following that calling to go do my master's, to go do my PhD, to go live in a city that's very expensive when I have no money, and just say, okay, Lord, like, I don't know, you got to figure this out. Like, and realize that he came through has been such a gift for my trust in God, which is generally pretty weak. I mean, and that's not a God problem. That's obviously a me problem. So yeah, like tough, but I'm grateful for those things, you know?
Exactly. And I was just thinking, you know, this especially, so we talked about how like for women, like one of the things that for us is like children, you know, how do we think about this when we're called to something like grad school?
Yeah.
And you know, I think the key word in this whole episode is like just trust. Like grad school is about trust. Like if you're called to grad school, you're called to trust. That's just the case.
Yeah.
You know, but I also am like for men, and I have men, like there are men in my grad school program who are wonderful guys. And it's like in theology, again, like we said, don't pay a lot of money. So it's like, if you're called to this, you also called to marriage, to be a husband, to be a father, to provide for your family. Like, how do you navigate that? And again, I think it's like it's trust. And I see these like there's this one PhD student at my grad school. I mean, there's multiple of them, but like one that's coming to mind where he has a family, like children, and he and his wife were missionaries before, so like they know how to do this. And it's like like he's one of the most ordered people I've ever met in my life. And I'm like, I don't understand how your life works. Like I literally don't. But it's so beautiful to see what's possible, like what God can do, and like give like, you know, gifting, like in a way in my life, like these images or these like examples of these holy men who are so responsible and taking good care of their families somehow while being in grad school.
Totally.
Like, okay, these things are possible.
Yeah.
So God can do crazy
God can
things.
work with all of that. Absolutely. Well, I mean that, so that was something even in my discernment when I was dating Nathan, because I was in grad school and he was also in grad school for theology, PhD in theology. As we're talking about, and it was just this thing where he was like, you know, so Nathan has 2 master's degrees and then he's in his PhD in theology, and and he's worked sort of here and there in between those different degrees. But it was the kind of thing where he shared that like, each of those times where he was called into school, he felt called into that. But there's this lingering big question of like, but what kind of job is this gonna get me? And theology teaching jobs are few and far between, we've learned, right? So and so that was a huge thing of like, say, okay, Lord, like, are you calling me to this person where I don't know what our future is going to look like in terms of, you know, his ability to provide, and trying to trust God in that and trust him in that. And it was just like the Lord had to give me some real consolation for that. And like, and I'll share, like a few weeks ago, Nathan started a job as a hospital chaplain, which is kind of like a he's like a resident kind of, it's like a but it's a job. He's getting paid to do it. And you know, you need a master's in theology for this job, and and I can see the way that all his other experiences have like led to him actually being really good at this. And you know, and just it's like this thing of like, okay, Lord, like you were leading. Okay, great. You know,
there were reasons, you know, for all those calls.
There were reasons for this, right? And so I think it is an invitation to try, and it's a long-term trust, because grad school sometimes, like if you do a PhD, you're talking like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years sometimes, where you have to trust, like, okay, if you called me to this, Lord, you're going to show me, you're going to show me what's next, you know, in the practical things.
That's right.
Yeah.
And one last, I mean, I feel like, you know, this has just been a conversation between 2 grad students, for real. Like, this is just like 2 grad students just like being like, this is reality. But another thing that I think, and maybe like this can be one of like, I don't know if there's some other things you want to talk about, Nicole, but I was thinking this is a grad school problem, but I think it's maybe a young adult problem in general, which is like isolation. Like if you're not, if you're in grad school, you're not married. Sometimes when you are married, right, like it's hard because you I mean, where do you find your community, all that kind of stuff,
right?
If you're not married, like you can find community, obviously there's like young adult stuff, but you're always in transition. Like nothing's permanent. Like you don't live, you don't have a spouse, you know. We talked about this a bit in our home episode, but I think it's like it's a broader question than just like home. You don't have anything permanent in your life at all. You don't have a job that you know you're working towards. You don't have like you're maybe moving from year to year, so you don't even have like a permanent physical community. And that is very, very challenging. And I think that like it's not, especially as you get, because when you're in grad school, then you're starting to be in your mid-20s, your late 20s. In my case, I'm in my 30s, and you're really at stages in your life where you're starting to crave some kind of
Yeah.
stability.
Well, and it's the thing
So
of not only are you kind of in sort of in transit, but all of the people around you are
exactly.
transient. Like probably everyone, like I'm thinking of like downtown Toronto, everyone who's there maybe came for school, at least, you know, in the grad programs, like came there for grad school and then they're going to move away after. Like
Exactly.
not a huge number are actually from Toronto.
That's right.
I remember having these conversations with like a friend who is from Toronto and was also doing her PhD. And she was like, yeah, it's hard for me to want to make friends with anyone because I know
Yeah,
they're going to leave in a few
that's
years.
right.
Like, you know, and so
Yeah.
it's like, how do you
It's
find
very
community?
painful.
Yeah.
It's very
Yep.
painful reality. Because I think it's like, I mean, I like that you brought that up with your friend because it's sort of like you yeah, you don't even really want to make yourself vulnerable because you're like, I just have to keep
Yeah.
saying bye. Like I have to
Mm-hmm.
keep, and it is very psychologically painful to have to keep
Right.
losing
Yeah.
people or losing
Yep.
stability. And that's kind of how it can feel.
Right.
Um, and I think,
And you can almost react. Like I think the way I remember when this is when a roommate that I had in Toronto and she shared this and I was like, huh, I don't feel the same way. But I think it's because I've already gone the extra step where I'm like, I'm not going to know these people forever. I'm just not going to connect super deeply with them.
mm,
And that's fine, you know, and just
right,
kind of, but then, and then you're not actually being
engaging.
vulnerable. You're not really engaging fully. You're just
Yeah,
kind of like living on the edges, which is that's not a healthy way to live either,
no,
right?
that's
So
true.
that's a tough thing, I think.
It's really tough. And I don't know if I
Yeah.
have like how I think in my life there is a way in which there's a proper detachment, I think, which is just like, okay,
Mhm.
again, Lord, like I'm just clinging to you.
Yeah.
So we talked about this, I think, in our home episode, but the sacraments are such a help in this because that's a
Mhm.
constant that you never like
Yeah.
Jesus on Sunday
Yep.
is, if not every day during the week, if you can, like whatever,
Mhm.
at Mass on Sunday, you
Mhm.
will be in a church, the Eucharist will be
Mhm.
there, you will hear the word of
Yeah.
God. That is so comforting that's
Yeah.
such a beautiful reality. So you can like live the
Yeah.
transient sort of
Yep.
everything else from that place of stability,
Absolutely.
gives you the capacity, he gives you the capacity to sort of
Mhm. Yeah, and
navigate,
I think
you know.
in the similar lines, I remember, so I was able to go, I went with on a CCO. For those of you who are US listeners, so CCO, Catholic Christian Outreach, is like the Canadian version of Focus. So it's a university campus ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on a CCO mission trip to Mexico City almost 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember seeing like Our Lady of Guadalupe, who is like patroness of the Americas. And so I was like, okay, she's my mother here when I'm traveling in Mexico. And my mom was
Yeah.
sick at the time. So I was like, okay, she's my mother no matter what happens with my mom.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, in Canada, she's my mother. And then I moved to the States and I'm like, still my
Still my
mom,
mom.
still my mother. Like same thing, patroness of the Americas,
Yeah,
Canada,
I
US,
love that.
Mexico. And so that was like comforting where I'm like, okay, even if my grad school and now takes me to a job that's like in a different country, which it
Yeah.
did, I'm like, okay, I still have Jesus in the Eucharist and I still got my mama, like Mama
Yeah.
Mary.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is
Oh,
it's
so
not, and I mean
comforting.
that I don't want to over spiritualize it, but there is something
No,
comforting
it
in that.
totally
Like
is. It
that's
totally
like
is.
that's the one like kind of personal art that I have in my office is a little like picture of the Our Lady of Guadalupe
Oh, that's
picture because
awesome.
it's just yeah,
She's so beautiful.
she is so beautiful.
Yeah. I guess maybe to end on, not that it's not been really a downer. It's just sort of been like a little bit of a
Yeah.
survey of of grad school life and the way
Yeah.
that it is and the way that it is challenging. But I think,
Yeah.
you know, the beauty of all of this trusting that you have to
Mm-hmm.
do is it really helps you, I think, in like you said, like all the challenges that are going to come in your big V
Mm-hmm.
vocation, if you're not yet in it, in your work and everything,
Mm-hmm.
you can really build a foundation of trust the Lord in grad school
I
in a
think
really
that's
special
true.
way,
Yeah, and okay, let me say one more maybe
Yeah.
small topic because is just like the topic of like self-worth and confidence
Yes.
or
That's
insecurity,
huge. Yeah.
right? Because I think, I mean, for myself in undergrad, this was a huge struggle for me where like my grades were very tied to my self-worth and all of that. And I worked through a lot of that. So by the time I went to grad school, it wasn't so big. But I
Yeah.
think that it was still a temptation where I'm like, okay, my value is in, writing this really good paper or to
Yeah.
doing this really good research study in my PhD or something. But I remember this piece of wisdom that this professor, I was like collaborating, helping out with this research project in my master's, and um, at the professor who was supervising the project, I had shared with him that I was thinking of doing my PhD, and he's like, okay, let me give you some advice. So he like gave me several pieces of advice. Um, and one of them was, he was like, okay, in your PhD, it doesn't matter how smart you are anymore. It's not about you anymore. It's just about your persistence. Is can you see this thing through? And that was just such good advice, because it first of all, it's a good reminder, I think, that when you're pursuing, excellence in a really particular subject in a master's or a PhD, in grad school, um, it becomes not about whether you're smart or not, but it is your dedication and persistence. I think, especially with a PhD, because it's just more years, right?
Yeah.
Um, that I don't know. I see some parallels to that in marriage, where it's like, okay, in marriage, it's not about how beautiful you are anymore, or how perfect you are,
Right.
or how attractive you are. It's like, can you persist in the ups and the downs?
Yeah.
To
I
love this
love
other
that.
person and see this through to the end, right?
Wow.
Um,
I love that.
so I think it can be yeah, and I
Thank you for
just
that.
like, yeah.
Yeah, I so love that, because I also like that it's, in a certain sense, like it's not about you anymore. Because the funny thing is, grad school you can sort of make your life about you. That's the other
Right.
danger. It's like you can kind of lose
Mm-hmm.
touch with sort of the reality of life, not just, I don't
Mm-hmm.
even just mean like in community and stuff, but just like that your life is not about you. Like, of course it's about you, like you're supposed to grow, but it's
Yeah.
about like glorifying God and
Yeah.
loving others, but together,
Yeah.
it's like glorifying God is sort of the primary
Yeah,
principle.
and like this pursuit of truth, something in
It's
God's truth that
exactly,
you have nothing to do with. Like you didn't
exactly,
cause it. Like you are just
I
trying to
love
discover
that.
that.
Oh,
Um,
I
yeah,
love that. That's exactly right. So it's like, it's not
yeah.
about you. It's about, even the work that you're doing is not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you come into contact with what is like,
Mm-hmm.
and what, who you are is even like, what is made who you are. Like God made
Yeah.
you and he is truth. And it's like, so in a certain sense, it's like you're just letting it's your yes, and which comes to
Mm-hmm.
your persistence. It's that persistence, which is just your yes to
Mm-hmm.
what is being asked of you in that
Yeah.
moment. Which is not, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
so
Like
like,
it's like God's saying like, will you let me show you something that I created that's really
oh,
beautiful and interesting? And I have created you specifically to be interested in this specific thing of my
that's so
creation. Will you
cool.
spend the time to let yourself sink in and let me unfold this in front of you? Um, and persist in it, even though like God is almighty, and God's creation is so beyond. And so you're gonna, like, as a human, and you're gonna be
Oh yeah.
confused at times. You're not gonna know what's going on. Will you persist, because I want to show you something, right?
Oh, oh my gosh, I love that so much. It just like, I think that's been the funny thing is, I was talking at the beginning of the podcast about this like test that I had to do, and honestly, like I don't even know, like my journey in grad school is all the Lord. Like if he wants me to stay here, if he doesn't, I might not even be here after this test. I don't know. I have to pass this test, so we'll see what happens. But like, even no matter what, this is just like in hypothetical, no matter what happens, I think that has been my experience so far, is like
Mm-hmm.
he really, and it's such a beautiful experience, like with the Lord. I love that. He's
Mm-hmm.
just like, can I just show you something? And it's not even, it's like, I'm going to show you and no one else is going to know. It's not like a secret or something like that, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, will you let your heart like wonder? We talk about this at
Mm-hmm.
the Institute a lot. Like, what, like
Yeah.
wonder is the start of philosophy. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, will you let your heart just wonder at something? Like,
Mm-hmm.
would you just kind of
Yeah.
stay here with me? And it's like,
Right.
yeah, I want to do
Yeah.
that. So big.
There's something so sacred in it. Like, um, and it's like, I don't
There is.
know, maybe someone else could study the same things that I'm studying, but they would see it a little bit different, because they are a different person,
That's true.
right? And then I would learn something from that person, but
Right.
only I can do the work that I'm doing, because I'm me and I have a different background
Yeah.
and perspective.
That is
And
so true.
so it can be a very intimate and beautiful thing with the Lord, where he shows you something that is beautiful and true, and you kind of persist. You're like, I don't know what I'm looking at. What is this? What do you want to, like, but I
Yeah.
do think that, like, um I do think that prayer and like walking with the Lord in grad school, in research and all of these things, is is a way to open yourself up to co-creating with God, right? Like, and
Yeah.
like discovering because he's the one that led you here. So he wants to show you something. It's not just
Yeah.
you figuring out some sort of research, but like, I don't know. And so
Oh,
I feel like I've experienced that in like my PhD and trying to figure out, well, what am I
yeah.
going to research? And I had all this plan, and then COVID happened. But it was like I would get sometimes just like inspirations or things. And it's like the Lord putting here, go here, like these little inklings.
Yeah.
And then I would follow that inkling and realize, oh yeah, there is something here. Other people, and so it
Whoa.
has felt like something where it's not just me like grinding away, but it's actually being responsive to this little kind of, I don't know, fun little scavenger hunt that the Lord's had me on for the last
Oh,
6 years or something, and not so fun at times and confusing and very
Yeah.
frustrating. And there have been
Mm.
moments literally where I wanted to give up. There was one
Oh, yeah.
project where I talked with my supervisor and I'm like, can I just not do this project? Have I not done enough of other
Yeah.
things? And he was like, no, do this project. And I'm okay. And I did the project,
I like that. Have I not done enough?
Yeah.
Have you not, you're not satisfied with my pound of
Yeah.
flesh?
But anyway.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Oh, that
Thank
was
you
a
for
little bit of a
sharing
rant,
that.
but that's, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I feel like I don't know what we're going to call this episode because I don't know if we talked that much about the challenge. I feel like we just talked about how beautiful and awesome it is to be in grad school and trust God. And
I will say 1 year ago, I was like in tears because, okay, here is the other thing that one advice that this person gave me was just that he was like, be ready that everything that could possibly go wrong
yeah,
in your PhD
your
is going
life.
to go
Yeah.
wrong. And so just keep going, And I was
That's
like, oh my
great
gosh, like
advice.
2 years of my PhD, the pandemic happened. And then literally every stage of certain projects like fell apart or something happened or things weren't mailed properly, or it was just like, someone didn't do the right experimental condition or whatever it was. It was just like literally every step has just been like, it's like a nightmare after one after another. And so many tears, so much frustration. But like now I'm almost done, and I'm kind of looking at and I'm like, I don't know how I got through all these different things, but
Right.
somehow, so it's not, I'm able to look back now and be like, oh, it's wonderful. God has
It's so
been leading me
beautiful.
the whole time, and it's been a meadow of butterflies, but it has not felt like that the whole time. It's
Yeah,
felt like
no.
a grind and a slog
Yeah.
and a just frustration many, many times.
It's true. But I do think that like I feel like I'm in the grind part of it. And
Yeah.
again, like yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think that so far my experience remembering the things that you're saying, really like kind of staying plugged into the reason why I'm here, which is just that the Lord called me here. That is and not in a sort of like functional way, in the ways that we've been talking about, like that he's called me for a reason, for like this particular experience with him. That really kind of helps. And sometimes you have like incredible consolation that God gives you in that. And when you don't have the consolation, the perseverance is
right. It's like that's the lesson, is like, okay,
yeah,
if you called, I don't even know if you called me here sometimes. It doesn't make
sometimes.
sense, but I'm going to keep acting as if you did, because I
Yes.
remember at one point I was convinced of that, right? It's like this big
Yes.
desolation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah.
Anyway.
Praise God for grad school. I mean, I don't know who's going to listen to this episode. And like, I don't know if it's grad students or people discerning grad school. I hope we don't freak anybody out who's thinking about it. But like, I guess if you're in it and you're struggling, like,
we're with
hope.
you.
We're with you. Have hope.
Have hope. Yeah.
If you're not sure it's your calling, like, go back to the Lord. Like, he really does call us to things. That's real. He does.
It's through our desires. It's like, and I think I always thought, I was like, how do I discern my desires? And I'm like, no, the desire is the discernment. Like, if you are plugged into the Lord and you have a strong desire towards something, like, go towards it. And it's always a thing of like, if Lord, if you don't want me to do this, like, shut the door in my face. And like, he will.
He will.
But
he will. That's the thing. He actually will. I think that's what I think I want to just affirm that. Like, God really will. He is. If you are seeking him, he is speaking to you. Like, he is not ignoring you. He just and sometimes you just have to persevere until you can hear what he's saying, or maybe he's asking you to wait, because whatever it is, we're praying for you. It can be tough, but
and I think it's like, if you're discerning grad school, I think a thing to discern is why if let's say you desire this, like, why do I desire this? Do I think it's going to bring me some sort of glory or affirmation or
right.
something, in which case it won't.
Don't do
no
it.
one cares.
Don't
No
do
one cares
it.
what you do in grad school.
Yeah,
Don't do
that's
it.
right.
It's not
Don't
for
do
you.
it. No.
But if it's just like a sincere desire of a curiosity, or just of a, like, you don't know why, you just really want to do this, and you know,
you have a
well,
question.
then maybe there's something there.
Yeah, you have a question, you want to know more about it. Yeah, that sounds so silly. It's like, as an adult, why would you waste your time if you just have a question? Just like read some books. Like, that's actually what someone told me. Actually, I think it was my brother who also has a PhD. Like, do you have to do this? Like, can you just like read books? And I was like, honestly, it is like, you could sometimes, like, you could read books, you know. And I mean, we were gonna wrap up the episode, and then I started with this, but like, sometimes you could read books, but in my case, like, I really did think about that. I was like, can I just do this by just like reading on my own time? Like, is that what I'm called to do? And the answer was no, but it was a good question. It was a good question.
This is like a flow chart, you know.
Yeah.
I desire to go to grad school. Why? Could I just read books? Yes. In case don't go to grad school. Am I doing it because I think like people are gonna think I'm cool and I'm gonna like to make some huge discovery in my PhD? You won't. Don't go to grad school. Like whatever you do.
Into like an Ask Nicole, Ask Rachel about grad school episode. You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. And yeah, it's good. Hey, if you want to talk about grad school more, I mean, I actually like talking to people about grad school, as you maybe can tell. And so you can reach out, and you can on our Instagram or something, and you can go and Google my name, and you'll find my academic profile, and you can email me, and I'm really happy to chat about grad school. And I'll do that once in a while. People are interested in like music therapy or something. I'll have a little Zoom meeting, or we'll email some questions back and forth. And I love that stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I have no such wisdom to offer. I'm still in it like big time. So,
well, I'm not claiming that I have wisdom to offer, but I just like talking about it.
I think you do. I think you have wisdom.
Well,
what were we going to tease about the next episode? I can't even remember.
Oh yeah. I was wanted to tease about it. Okay. So I can tell. So we'll switch gears here. Well, and this kind of flows well. So our next episode is about dating.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But we're gonna have we're gonna have a special guest on, and her name is also Rachel.
Oh yeah.
And she just wrote a book on dating, and I have a feeling it's gonna become one of those like, go-to books for Catholic young people who are trying to think about dating, because she's just really great and practical. And so anyways, I won't say too much about that, but stay tuned for this episode coming out, a little bit before Valentine's Day. I don't know exactly which date it'll be published, but early February. And Rachel is a friend of mine here in Nashville, and she is great. So it'll be like two Rachels, a Nicole, and maybe an Aaron as well.
Yeah. Gosh.
Talking about dating.
There's two Rachels around, I gotta say, it's good stuff. I'm not
there you
lie.
go.
Every time I meet a Rachel, I'm like, you're awesome.
Yeah.
So far, I've yet to meet
great.
a Rachel I don't genuinely love. So
yeah.
I'm excited to meet this Rachel. There are a lot of Rachels in the US. That's another thing. It's a very big name here.
It's a common name. Yeah. What does it mean? What does Rachel mean?
I think it means lamb, or like female sheep. But also it's like, so I think it's like related. Yeah, it's related to lamb. So it's like Hebrew. It's Hebrew for lamb. But it's related also to Agnes, which is like Agnes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Right.
I think. I don't know. I could have made that up. Just scratch that.
Maybe we'll tell you next week, or you can Google it.
Yeah.
You can Google it. It's fine.
That's right. Okay. Well, this has been like a journey. I feel like we've gone on a roller coaster ride.
Good. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. God bless you guys.
Thanks for listening.
Email Nicole, and
maybe, but not. Yeah. I mean, I was like, if you all email me, then it might take me a little while to get back to you. But you can email me.
I don't think they'll all email.
I don't think so either. That's like a prideful thought,
Yeah.
Oh, they're all gonna email me because I did a PhD almost.
That's hilarious. I was more thinking that like there's probably, if we have like, if like 100 people listen to this episode, there's probably gonna be like 4 who are like, I want to go to grad school, like, because I think everyone
would be like 0.5 people email me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have a God wink, Rachel? We didn't talk about this beforehand.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna say that my God wink, I will share my God wink as what I will share this this moment. It's kind of a little serious. It's not like a funny moment, but it's kind of serious. And you know about this already, Nicole, but when I was home at Christmas, because my semester has been really intense and really tough. I got really
Mhm.
sick and I had like fevers and it was crazy. And like, yeah, I was really unwell. And I woke up one night in the middle of the night, just like high fever, just kind of like in a feverish, but I was like in a panic attack. And I'm not somebody who has panic attacks regularly, like, once in a while, like a long while, years. So it's like weird for me. And so I like
Yeah.
woke up in the middle of one. So like hyperventilating was, like,
Yeah.
in the middle. And I think I was like subconsciously anxious about school. And I didn't even
Mhm.
realize it because yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Which,
Lord,
side note, sorry, this is a side note about suffering in
yeah.
grad school. I have not slept well since I started my PhD. That's when it all began. So there we go.
Okay,
That's
well, there you
just
go.
normalize that for you. Anyways,
Yeah.
okay.
Which, yeah, is also helpful information for the discernment chart that we've created
Discerners.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so woke up like in a panic attack, totally subconsciously, like was like, what the heck's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord said, I wasn't even like really aware that I was panicking about school. I was just panicking.
Yeah.
And in my panic, I really got this, experienced this sort of, I mean, I'll call it like a word from the Lord, but like
Mm-hmm.
experienced this sort of, yeah, God just speaking into my heart. And
Yeah.
the word was like, Rachel, be ordinary, stop trying to be extraordinary. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys don't wake up every morning and be like, I have to be extraordinary. So it wasn't like conscious, but I
Mm-hmm.
woke up and I really processed that. And I was like, there was all this pressure that I was putting on
Mm-hmm.
myself about things that I didn't realize I was pressuring myself over, that God was so clear in my heart. Like, he did not care. He was like, I do not care
Mm-hmm.
about any of that. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
about outcomes. I don't care about this. I don't care about all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Just do what I'm asking you to do
Mm-hmm.
faithfully in your ordinary,
Mm-hmm.
limited Rachel way. That's all I
Mm-hmm.
ask of you. And I really felt I was to take that seriously. So my God wink is that happened. And then this month, people have been praying a lot for me, and I've been working, and it has been such a period of consolation of just being ordinary. Like, you think that it's the outcomes of your work that give you peace, but it
Mm-hmm.
isn't. It's just having
It's the Lord.
it's the Lord who gives you peace in
Yeah.
just doing the work. And
Yeah. Right.
one of the saints that has come up, and I don't really have his quote here, but has come up in that is St. Francis de Sales,
Hmm.
who he, like, a couple of days before my exam, I was talking to my roommate about all these consolations that God was giving me. And she's like, oh my gosh, I was reading today's Magnificat, and there was this writing that was just like all of these things that you were
Hmm.
saying. And she's like, I'm just going to give it to you. And it was from St. Francis de Sales.
Hmm.
And it's so funny because when God gave me that word, be ordinary, not extraordinary, it was him that I thought of, and him who I've had in
Hmm.
mind this whole time.
Hmm.
And I'll end with this. Like, I think this is an anecdote. I don't know if it's like historically accurate, but this is his attitude, where he would say,
Yeah.
like, he would have letters to write before, that every day he was in charge of lots of things. And he would like stop responding to letters at a particular time, let's say like 8 p.m. And there'd be
Yeah.
like piles of letters still unopened.
Hmm.
And he would just stop, because God was like, this is it. This is the time you
This
have to
is your
write letters.
bedtime.
This is your
Mm-hmm.
bedtime, or this is your prayer time, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he wouldn't even think about it. He was just like, okay.
Mm.
And it was this trust that the
Yeah.
work that I did not get to today, Lord, that is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the work you've asked me to do. That is what I can offer you in my limited way. Like,
Hmm.
limits are beautiful and good because
Mm-hmm.
they cause us to trust God. We're not God,
That's so beautiful.
you
Yeah.
know?
Ooh,
So
that's so good.
that was my God wink. It was long. There you go. God bless
No,
you, God.
that was good. God bless you. All right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
And if you like this episode, share it with a friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough, and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless, and see you next week.